Three, two, one. Pentagon says the war in Afghanistan is not going to the right direction. What was expectation and why it's happening like that in ground in Afghanistan?
Well, I would say that what we're seeing in Afghanistan is just sort of the more pessimistic side of what was expected and what was predicted. And I'm sure that many people at the Pentagon knew that. And what you're seeing is an effort to at least be honest and acknowledge that this is a less good scenario than we wanted. But clearly, President Biden back last spring made the decision that he was willing to live with this possibility. I think he made a big mistake. But given that that was the president's decision, this kind of outcome was entirely possible. And therefore, the Pentagon statement is certainly true on its face, but it's really just an acknowledgement that things are sort of going as many of us expected they would. It may not be the desired direction, but it is sort of the expected direction. And the main question now is, will the country completely collapse, or will there be more of a partitioning and ultimately a back and forth, maybe a stalemate, an ongoing civil war? Those are the two possibilities, but there's really no possibility anymore that the government could somehow decisively control the insurgency even after NATO troops withdrew.
Also, Kirby didn't speak that much clearly about the continuing airstrike support or air support to Afghan forces. But recently, with the intensifying of violence in different locations, U.S. aided Afghan forces. How it will impact the moral and ground, especially Taliban fighting?
Well, the United States now has a big decision to make as to just how hard it's going to try to prevent Taliban takeover of the country. And I think that U.S. air power is the number one swing variable. It's the number one thing we have not yet fully decided that could make a big impact. I'm not suggesting that American aircraft need to be involved day to day in strike missions, and I'm sure President Biden does not want that. But we could evolve towards something more like what the United States did in Iraq after the takeover by ISIS, where our effort is primarily through air power and maybe some special forces, but we don't really have a ground force component. And so that kind of an option remains available to the United States. President Biden does not need to think that he's ruled it out. Now, the Taliban might not like it, but the Taliban are showing an extraordinary brutality against American allies. And I don't think we should be too concerned about what the Taliban want, especially when they're in violation of the February 29th, 2020 peace deal on multiple fronts, including their ongoing ties to Al-Qaeda.
So in the war strategy, Taliban war strategy now like mostly concentrated in the northern Afghanistan, and they're getting cities and provinces. Why they choose north?
Well, the north is an interesting area. It's not home of the Pashtun, of course. It is more of a Tajik and Uzbek area, but over the centuries, there were Pashtun communities that developed and grew.
Repeat because it broke. It didn't get a beginning of the answer. Just start, if you can, start your answer again. I'm sorry.
Okay. Historically, the north has been more of a Tajik and Uzbek area, and it's where the Northern Alliance, of course, holed up during the 1990s. The Taliban never controlled all of the north in the 1990s, especially the Panjshir Valley and certain other locations. So I think perhaps the Taliban is reversing its priorities and trying to convey that if it can take the north, it can take anywhere, because that's sort of in a way where you would not expect it to succeed. Having said that, it does not really predominate in the north in terms of sympathizers or supporters. There aren't that many Pashtun in the north. They're concentrated in a few places. And so it's a little bit of a risky strategy for the Taliban. And the government does have a lot of forces and militias that it can call upon in the north to try to contest what the Taliban has been doing. I'm not sure that's worth trying in every small city or town, but in areas like Mazar-e-Sharif, I would expect a very protracted fight. And I think the government has a lot of allies that don't want the Taliban to win.
A lot of Afghans believe that these Taliban are Pakistanis and they're made by Pakistan, led by Pakistan, and they believe it's not a civil war anymore, it's a war against your Pakistan proxies. What's your thoughts about it? Do you share the same concern like Afghans?
Well, I think that's getting at a serious problem, but it's not quite accurate. The Pakistani state is not the main problem. The main problem is the Afghan Taliban and Afghans who are in the Afghan Taliban. However, they have been supported by the Pakistani state in the past, or at least they've been given sanctuary, because Islamabad wanted a backup plan in case the Karzai and Ghani governments did not succeed in stabilizing the country. And so that's why Afghans are angry with Pakistan. And that's why NATO is angry with Pakistan. But it's not the same thing as saying Pakistan is the main perpetrator of the violence. Pakistan has sometimes been a facilitator, but it is not the main perpetrator.
John Kirby says that it's Afghans' war, and saying that claiming Afghan has 300,000 forces and they can fight their own war. So what do you think Afghanistan future is going? What is next for Afghanistan, in your opinion?
I think Afghanistan has to decide how to use the parts of the military that are truly dependable and truly excellent in defense of certain key parts of the country, but let other parts go. So not defending the more rural areas. That was partly a conscious decision by the government. That was a good decision. On some of the cities that have fallen in the last few days, I think it would be smarter not to try to retake them. Use the special forces, use the best parts of the army to defend the key cities and maybe occasionally to go on the counterattack. But otherwise acknowledge the Taliban will have some gains. There's just no way around that. And it's better not to think that just because the Afghan army and police are big, that therefore they can take everything back. Because we know in some cases they're not as strong or not as well led as they should be. And they're not going to fight. They're going to decide to save their own lives or otherwise pose only modest resistance. So it's not smart for the Afghan government to be overly impressed by the size of the army and police and think that therefore it should be able to hold all the cities in the country. We know that's not true. It's going to require, the whole effort's going to require prioritization.
So last question, what is next for U.S. Future after August 31st? Do you think U.S. may continue its presence or may go back, or how it will continue supporting Afghan government?
I think the United States will try to provide economic and military aid along with other donors. It will try to help find a place where Western contractors can help service the Afghan Air Force in a country or a location that's safe. And then the big decision will be whether to put special forces on the ground and whether to use U.S. air power from the broader region in support of the Afghan government. Those are the big decisions that I am not sure have yet been made.